Hey, Blake T. Wild here, and Mark Millar is back in action after taking his blitzkrieg approach of comics, aka Millar World, from Image directly to Dark Horse Comics. And he's also taken to Twitter and become like buddies with comic skaters now? Although, what did we really expect from an ex-choir boy who supported Brexit and wrote the unfunnies? But that's the present. Let's go back to the past. 20 years, to be exact. Or possibly even before then. Like 25 years. All the way back to Superman 2000. Or Superman Now. Which is a strange coincidence, because Marvel would later redefine their entire printing run by creating something called Marvel Now. And Superman Now, or Superman 2000, was a idea to revitalize and redefine Superman. Every time that Superman Red Sun comes up in discussion, usually online, there's a 99.9% chance that someone, usually unprovoked, will say, "Did you know that Grant Morrison came up with the ending?" If you don't know what the ending of Superman Red Sun is, then skip to this time code that's right here, because I'm going to spoil it right away in this video. And, if you don't want to get spoiled, then click right here. It's mentioned everywhere. Every goddamn article that brings up Superman Red Sun brings up the fact that Grant Morrison came up with the ending twist. It's everywhere online, except the one website that everybody uses as their source. A Newsarama article from December 2004 titled Grant Morrison Talking All-Star Superman, which Wikipedia describes as a, quote, permanent dead link. But after an embarrassingly long amount of time searching for it, I think I finally found it on a little website called theages.superman.new. There's a webpage that has seemingly copied the entire transcript and just rehosted the original article, or at least the Grant Morrison written section of it. And in that article, Grant Morrison had this to say regarding Superman Red Sun. "The best Superman idea I ever had, I gave to Mark Millar for the conclusion of Red Sun, so I've been forced to try even harder to do something even better here." Morrison then discusses the reused pitches that they themselves used from Superman 2000 for All-Star Superman. This was still a little bit before they had done Action Comics, which also reused some points from Superman 2000. They discuss Mark Waid and what he did with Birthright, but nowhere in this article does it say what people usually would have come to believe regarding the Superman 2000 pitch in Red Sun. Nowhere does it say that the Red Sun Superman twist, being that Krypton is actually Earth billions of years into the future, and that Superman is sent back in time, through time dilation from his rocket ship when Krypton is destroyed. That is nowhere in the Superman 2000, Superman Now proposal. That has just become sort of something that's just been melded together culturally in the realm of comics and comic book fandom. It's wholly unrelated to one another. But what was Superman Now, Superman 2000? Like I said before, it was a proposed complete revitalization of the Superman character and comic line to be published in the new millennium. Grant Morrison, Mark Waid, Mark Millar, Tom Payer, they were all cast as the new custodians of Superman. And Morrison described it in his book, Super Gods, as follows. "Mark Millar, Tom Payer, Mark Waid and I had approached DC in 1999 with the idea of relaunching Superman for a new generation in a series to be entitled Superman Now or Superman 2000, depending on which version of the story synopsis you read. We'd spent many enjoyable hours in conversation working on how to restore our beloved Superman to his preeminent place as the world's first and best superhero." Morrison then continues by describing the current state of Superman at the time. Superman in the comics, inspired by the immense success of the Lois and Clark TV show, finally married Lois Lane. Morrison calls this era of Superman a diminished figure, all but sleepwalking through a sequence of increasingly contrived event storylines, which tried in vain to hit the heights of the death of Superman 7 years previously. Superman now was to be a reaction against this often over-emotional and ineffectual Man of Steel, reuniting him with his mythic potential. One of the most interesting elements of the Superman 2000 proposal was the breakup of Lois and Clark. They wanted to make Lois Lane the official Daily Planet foreign correspondent, meaning that she is no longer in Metropolis, she's no longer in every issue of Superman, so there's going to be a rift that grows between them, which will make it easier to break them up. The unthinkable has finally happened. Luthor and Brainiac, working together, have finally unearthed the secret of Superman's dual identity, and they tell the world. Dun dun dun! The world learns that Clark Kent is Superman. What a crazy idea! That would never happen, I'm sure. And if it did, I'm sure it would be even better than this proposed hypothetical storyline. Right? After some high-concept strangeness, the characters learn that Brainiac has, altered the brain chemicals that are active in Lois Lane's memories to slowly poison and kill her. So Superman must turn to an other-dimensional entity to help him. Mr. Mixie's Pitalik. Mixie is able to save Superman's dearest beloved, but at a cost. And that cost is rewriting history so Lois Lane never knew that he was Superman. And across the world, everyone forgets Clark Kent is Superman. His secret is restored. Lois and Clark are never married. Although they were apparently going to get one final day to spend together, they undid all of this completely with the magical other dimensional powers of Mixie Pitalik and memory wiping. Does that sound familiar? Sound a bit like a certain Spider-Man story that everybody hates? Other aspects were things like Clark being the only person to call Jimmy Olsen Jim, as a way to show the reader that Clark respects Jimmy as his peer instead of a plucky little kid that hangs out the office. Steve Lombard and Cat Grant appear, just like in All-Star Superman. The Daily Planet has now moved on to become the world's preeminent global internet news service, which I think is something that happened in Superman Birthright. I'm pretty sure it is. It's been a while since I've read that story. Pa Kent dies and Clark is a vegetarian, because if he needs to eat at all, why would a man who has a code against killing consume animals who are kept in dark warehouses and force-fed for mass consumption, or even just kill animals to begin with? Bizarro and Bizarro World would be reimagined as a living planet that preys on other planets, like a living cancer. It would scan for life and prepare to imitate and then destroy Earth, just like All-Star Superman. Lex Luthor is described as so smart we don't even have a word for what he is yet. Calling him a genius is as insulting as calling him an imbecile. He's also described as redeemable until Superman showed up and ruined Lex's subconscious goal to be considered the greatest man who ever lived. And the way he would be introduced to Superman 2000 would be like this. We see Luthor playing chess with 20 grandmasters simultaneously while reading untranslated Il Principe and teaching himself Urdu via a Walkman he made for himself in 5 minutes back in 1962. Luthor was also set to create Brainiac, or at least a computerized body for Brainiac to inhabit, because this version of Brainiac was going to be dying. And my favorite supervillain, Solaris the Tyrant Sun from DC 1,000,000, was set to appear for his first ever encounter with Superman, something which happens in All-Star Superman. And also, another cool thing is that the Infant Universe Quek, which the proposal reveals is actually our universe, was something that they came up with for the Superman 2000 proposal, and is another aspect from All-Star Superman. And finally, they planned on getting rid of the red trunks. Oh my god. They also made a hard note of saying no more bad Superman or crazy Superman stories, because these creators rightly thought that Superman should be trustworthy and a loving, kind soul. Perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of this approach, at least to me, as someone who makes his own comics, was how the group planned on writing this revamp and ensuring that it came out on time and would be spunky enough, I guess, for an entirely new audience. An audience that the writers believed wanted a return to the classic character that everyone knows, while also creating fresh, interesting new takes on Superman. Instead of a new version of the same character to an old audience, Superman 2000 was to be the old version of the same character for a new audience. In a time where comics were near post-apocalyptic after the bubble blew up in the 90s, these four creators knew what needed to be done. And what needed to be done was to think about a whole new generation of readers. The four of us would like to pool our talents in a unique way. We're less interested in seeing each superbook assigned to one writer as we are in putting everyone's individual talents to their best use every week. Morrison and Millar are headmen, full of new and refreshing ideas. Payer and Wade write from the heart with an emphasis on dialogue and characterization. No more round-robin scripting where some guy's always stuck writing chapter 3. Instead, scenes and scripts fly back and forth across the Great Pond, and instead of duplicating past dynamics where good writers are introduced into the Superman collective and then sometimes forced to subsume their individual styles and visions, the adventures of Superman are chronicled by a group of like-minded scribes who were friends before they were partners, who know that they share a common vision, who are willing and eager to work as a unit for the good of their own hero. It's a whole new way of writing comics, but it's not without precedent. In broad strokes, it's similar to the way in which soap operas are crafted. Different writers are responsible for certain characters, plots, and subplots, all according to their particular passions and speciality. In the end, we know we can come through with stories the readers will be as excited to see as we will. Released in 2004, written by Mark Millar with art by Dave Johnson and Killian Plunkett, this is Superman Red Sun. This Elseworlds Superman story begins in the middle of the 20th century. Lois Luthor, that's right, is awoken in her Metropolis penthouse by her boss, chief of the Daily Planet, Perry White. He tells her that President Eisenhower is set to make a broadcast live at noon, and he's been told it's a matter of grave national importance. And Perry has an inside scoop. According to the rumors, the Soviets have developed a new weapon. Later that day, all of America watches or listens with bated breath as the president informs them of the newly released Soviet photos depicting an alien Superman who is more powerful than the hydrogen bomb. And he's a devout follower of communist ideals. Afterward, Eisenhower is informed by CIA agent Jimmy Olsen. Oh my god, is this where Zack Snyder got it from for Man of Steel? Or not Man of Steel, Batman v Superman? Is this book where he got the fucking idea from to make Jimmy Olsen a CIA agent? It honestly wouldn't be surprising if Superman Red Sun is the one that inspired him to make the Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and just his whole Superman in general, now that I think about it. Anyway, Olsen informs the president that their sources say the Ivans found the superhuman on one of their collective farms in the Ukraine after a rocket ship crashed there 30 years ago, and Eisenhower laments that if this rocket had just landed 12 hours sooner, this Superman would have been an American citizen. Later that day, Lois and Perry watch the news as a man claims that the Superman flew past him in Kansas. Lois says that the Pentagon confirmed 4 new superpowers: strength, speed, flight, and whatever the hell super breath is. Neither of them can figure it out. Alongside the already established X-ray vision, super hearing, and super sight. That night, across America, Soviet footage of their Superman is played, and Eisenhower orders that Lex Luthor of Star Labs is to be phoned. Cut to Star Labs in Metropolis. Lex Luthor stands in the parking lot playing chess against 20 grandmasters while simultaneously reading untranslated Il Principe and listening to a portable tape recorder that he designed this morning to teach himself Urdu. It's funny, though, because how much did Millar have to do with Superman 2000 proposal? Because that's like the only thing that really comes from the online document. Not much else. Maybe we'll see more of it in his upcoming Action Comics series, but for now, that's really all that he took from the Superman 2000 proposal. Anyway, Agent Olsen rocks up and greets Luthor, and the two step inside where Lex will reveal his anti-Superman deterrent that the US government is paying ludicrous amounts of money for. Holy smokes, this is even worse than I thought! You have the greatest minds in America sitting in a parking lot playing chess, and you won't even let them in the building? And all that garbage you keep ordering are puzzles and games? When are you going to start working, Luther? It doesn't look like you've done a goddamn thing in 3 months!
My subconscious is working, Agent Olsen. The puzzles lubricate the cogs of my brain. Genius doesn't work to some timetable.
The president isn't gonna be happy about this, Dr. Luther.
Just tell him he can use this formula I scribbled together to balance the federal budget.
You balanced the budget? Just like that?
No, I gave him the formula to balance the budget. Solving problems is just like eating or breathing for me, and this Superman you're all worried about is just another problem. Rest assured, I'll be in touch when I've cracked it.
Later at Luther's penthouse apartment, Lois returns home to find her husband playing chess against a robot while he watches a quiz show on mute to teach himself how to read lips. Lois hands him the morning paper and says that it feels like she's been writing and printing the same depressing stories for months. But Lex tells her that pretty soon, she'll have a Death of Superman headline and an exclusive interview with Dr. Lex Luthor. As Lex flips through the paper, he suddenly has a revelation and immediately calls Star Labs and says that he needs to speak to the president immediately. Lois asks if he's finally figured out a way to beat Superman, and Lex tells her that this is official government business and on a need-to-know basis, and pretty much kicks her out of the room. Then he tells Ike that he needs 100 technicians, $10 million, and permission to crash a Soviet satellite into a highly populated area.
I had made quite an impression in the 14 weeks since I had made my journey from the farmlands to Moscow. Some still thought me a trick of the light or an urban myth. In my more introspective moments, I even wondered if people were behaving more carelessly in hopes that they might catch a glimpse of their gaudy circus clown.
Comrade Secretary, this is a priority alert. We have lost control of Sputnik 2 and the satellite is plummeting towards Earth.
They called me a soldier, but that wasn't true. A soldier always follows orders. A soldier only fights and dies for his own people. I just fought for what was right. Sputnik 2 would have delivered a force powerful enough to level the entire city. I could have vaporized it with my heat vision, slowed its descent with my super breath. Instead, I chose the most exciting action. Exactly 3 seconds after hitting the roof of the newspaper office, I realized the damage done. I could hear loose bricks start to fall 2 miles west. Support cables groaned and snapped. People below screamed for someone to save them. Not my people, but I never refuse a cry for help. For just a single moment, all the lies they spread about me, the propaganda they engineered, none of it mattered. They realized I was here to save them.
Was this video really just an excuse for me to do my Russian accent and listen to the Red Army Choir while making this script? Maybe. After the Soviet departs America, Luthor says that he knew that Superman's acts of heroics wouldn't just be confined to Russia. And then he says that it really is a shame that Superman works for the Reds. If he'd been dropped in America, Lex is sure that he and Superman would have been the best of friends. But then he tells Agent Olsen to ensure that the hull of the Sputnik 2 is retrieved exactly the way he described it to be.
A chemical plant just caught fire 3,000 miles west of Vladivostok. Comrade Stalin, just give me 10 or 15 minutes, please.
Then don't be any longer. The Superman Day thing is supposed to be for you.
He has got the attention span of a spastic 2-year-old, hasn't he? Imagine not even being able to sit through your own damn parade.
What's he supposed to do, Captain? Stand there and grin like an idiot when he can hear people screaming for their lives?
He could show you a little more respect, Comrade Stalin. I can't believe you've really clasped him to your chest like this. How could you bring this alien from the Ukraine into our inner circle?
Because they love him. He makes Russia feel as indestructible as he is.
But I've been preparing for this since I was 8 years old. If Superman succeeds you, he could be there for 1,000,000 years.
Who cares if he succeeds me? You made the chief of the NKVD by 25, Peter.
What are you saying? That I've peaked before
I'm
30?
saying you should watch your tongue and remember who you're speaking to. You are only one of a number of illegitimate children I have. Be thankful I've given you this much.
In case you're wondering who this illegitimate son of Joseph Stalin is, you might be familiar with the classic, I guess, Superman side character, Peter Ross. Jesus Christ. He's Superman's thick-necked friend from childhood. This is Peter Roslov. Later that night at a Soviet gala held for Superman, Stalin meets with Queen Hippolyta to discuss forming an alliance with Paradise Island. Hippolyta says that while she appreciates the Soviet Union's record of women's rights, the USSR's human rights are another matter entirely. Which just shows what a strange alternative universe this is. Because the Soviet Union's stance regarding women's rights, and really any progressive policies that it had under Lenin, were pretty much undone and completely restricted within a Stalinist Russia, and immediately after World War II. Examples being divorce being made difficult to obtain, or abortions made completely illegal to, quote, encourage motherhood. Although after Stalin died, coincidentally enough, abortion was again legalized in 1955 to, quote, provide a woman with the opportunity to decide for herself the issue of motherhood, as well as to prevent harm caused to women's health by out-of-hospital abortions. Fun fact. Well, it's more of a fact. Nothing is fun about what I am about to tell you. Marital rape, which is exactly what it sounds like, was made illegal in the Soviet Union in 1922. In the United States, marital rape was not even considered to be outlawed until the 70s. And the last two states finally removed any exemptions they had for spousal marital rape in 1993. Moving back on to this fun little silly comic book. Hippolyta says that they are going to remain neutral for a little while longer, and Stalin brings up her daughter and Superman's interest in each other. Cut to Superman dancing in the air with Princess Diana of Themyscira. She asks why he looks so sad, and he says that he just doesn't enjoy having to endure all this pageantry of Superman Day. She says that she's also had to endure things similarly held in her honor on Paradise Island, so she can relate. Don't look forward to any Frank Miller-esque escapades of sexual deviancy between these two. Superman, I guess you could say, friend zones her. And that night after the festivities are over, Stalin and Superman speak. Stalin says that Diana would make a perfect wife for him, and their children would be incredible. Superman tells him that he didn't come here to breed, and Stalin tells him to start thinking about his future and his legacy. Then Millar makes a Man of Steel, Woman of Tissue reference, which, if you're unaware, was a article, sort of journal written 70s and 80s, maybe? 70s or 80s? I can't really remember when exactly. Pretty much saying that Superman would destroy any woman he had sex with. And he makes a joke reference kind of to that. I don't know, I just thought I should bring it up. Superman says that he'd like to choose his own wife, and then says that he doesn't want to even lead the party. He only came here to ensure that he could help people. Then Superman goes quiet, and when Stalin asks what he's doing, Superman says that he's scanning for Peter. He spots the young man and speeds away faster than a bullet. And miles away, Superman arrives as Peter drunkenly shoots a scarecrow. Superman asks why he wasn't there at the party, and tells Peter that he's been acting very irrationally recently, and he's worried about his comrade. Then Superman places the scarecrow's head back on, as Peter yells at him for always having to fix things. Superman tells him that he only fixes what's broken, and then he asks to speak to Peter about what's upset him. Peter gulps down some vodka and says,
"Who do you think you are?
flying around wearing our flag? How can they call you a symbol of everything we believe in when you aren't even from this planet? You are the opposite of Marxist doctrine, Superman, living proof that all men aren't created equal.
He didn't actually invite you, did he?
No, he didn't. And you know why? Because all Comrade Stalin wants to do is show you off. His man of steel. And the rest of us, we can all go to hell. Why bother with Pyotr Roslov as a bodyguard when you have an alien that could catch bullets since he was a toddler?
Actually, the powers didn't start until after my 12th birthday. My super hearing was the first to develop. I thought I was going crazy until I realized I was hearing the children in the next collective. Up until that point, I was an ordinary little boy. But do you know why I didn't leave the farm years ago? Because my parents wanted me to be ready when I went to Moscow. As much as you believe, it doesn't have to be a competition. Easy for you to say when you're streaking through the skies, not so much when you're down in the gutters like the rest of us. Did you hear about the purge last week? 2 dissidents printing anti-Superman leaflets. What are you looking at, boy? Go on! Get out of my sight! Your parents are dead! The kid could not have been older than 9. But his eyes, they weren't a child's eyes. I shot his parents. What does that do to a boy, Superman? It wasn't until you appeared that I realized how vile my job really is, and I am sick of it. Sick of working in a system where no matter how hard I try, I will never make it to the top now that you're here. I am sick of getting my hands dirty for a man who won't even admit I'm his own flesh and blood. You know you're really going to hurt yourself if you don't cut out all of this heavy drinking, Peter.
Damn you!
I have done something terrible, Superman. Comrade, my father, he made me so angry this morning that I... Wait here.
Cut to Moscow. Stalin lies dying on a table as he's surrounded by his loyal party members. Superman reads everything he can from medical textbooks and then enters the room.
Oh no! Oh, he's on the floor! He's on the fucking floor!
Okay, be careful, careful.
Oh, what to do? Oh, what to do? My heart, it feels sick. Like it's going into battle.
Telling them that Comrade Stalin's current condition was a result of acute cyanide poisoning. Later that night, Captain Roslov arrives to find his father dead. And meanwhile in America, Dr. Lex Luthor unveils his creation to Agent Olsen. Norman Rockwell, apple pie, stars and stripes, and the 4th of July. Agent Olsen, the president asked me to design a figure who might encapsulate all these things and give America back our much-needed swagger. Holy smokes, young man. I'd like you to meet Superman 2. In the following weeks, America exploits the political confusion of a now leaderless USSR as the party attempts to find a new one, and the Soviet Union is contained by the US increasing their number of nuclear stockpiles in the UK and surrounding countries. And there's confirmation that America has actually made a Superman of their own. But Superman still refuses to lead the party. Sometime later, a nuclear submarine travels through the English Channel with Superman 2, a take on the classic Bizarro Superman who was originally created as a horrible clone gone wrong by Lex Luthor. Also, he looks like Nicolas Cage in this panel, don't you think? Suddenly, Superman appears and explains to his duplicate that he's just learned English 10 minutes ago, so excuse him if anything comes out wrong, and then tells him to fuck off. Superman then laser visions Stooperman. Get it? Superman 2, and it's also Stupor Because he's Bizarro? Anyway, Bizarro has horrible actual X-ray vision that activates when he fights Superman and causes the nearby nuclear subcrew to become irradiated, bleed from their noses, and their heads to pounded with horrible radioactive migraines, and one of the operators, in a panic, engages their payload. A nuclear rocket explodes out of the sub into the sky as Stooperman punches Superman through London. Stooperman follows him, and Superman says that the USSR poses no threat to the future of Great Britain. Then he just beats the shit out of the Bizarro clone, who, now that I think about it, is kind of reminiscent of a gray alien. It kind of makes sense, I guess, depending on, when this is set. It's sometime in the 50s, they haven't said. Seemingly, this is some weird alternate reality where Sputnik has happened almost 10 years early. Anyway, a crowd appears and pleads with Superman to kill that horrible monster, but they're interrupted when that nuclear missile that was launched earlier soars overhead. The duplicate, showing that it is still a clone of Superman, and that Superman, in every universe, will always be good. Deep down, no matter what, freezes his progenitor and rockets into the sky, where he sacrifices himself by taking the nuclear warhead into far orbit. Oh, and we finally get a date for this fucking thing. 1953, apparently. It's still 1953. Stalin died in this universe about 7 months after he did in our world. Instead of October, his funeral was then held in early November. Sometime later, Peter and Superman discuss the future of the Soviet Union, and Superman again says that he's not interested in leading the party. He only cares for the common man.
Lois, our marriage is about to take an indefinite sabbatical. I've resigned from Star Labs and destroyed all of my notes and information on the Superman 2 project. And I've done away with the other members. It was a mistake to make the duplicate, and I need to ensure that it is never repeated.
Are you telling me that our marriage is over? Because Superman beat your monster in a fight?
What are you talking about? I don't care about the fight. That duplicate alien farm boy had the tenacity to beat me at chess last night. Later, Superman does some laps around the world as he thinks and ponders about what he should do. Eventually, he finds himself over a city in the Ukraine where he spots someone he recognizes. Lana Lazarenko, his childhood crush. An Eastern European play on the classic character Lana Lang. Obviously. He floats down and meets her as she waits in a bread line with her children. Superman says that it isn't right that she and her children have to beg like animals for food. Then he walks her up to the front where he orders the man inside to give her something to eat immediately. And the crowd, rightly so, become pretty upset and start pleading with Superman to help them too. Lana says that he can't possibly take care of everyone's problems, not with the system the way it is. But then Superman looks at her and says that if he was in charge, there's no reason why he couldn't.
You don't have to be scared or hungry anymore, comrades. Superman is here to rescue you. This episode is brought to you by My Comics, specifically the Custodians Agents of Cross, which I am serializing over on my Patreon, patreon.com/Smokey's videos. It's over 60 pages of pure comics for only $15, but you can see it serialized weekly over on my Patreon for as little as $2. It is a love letter to the Silver Age filled with fun characters, crazy stories, and even fake advertisements. I'm also serializing each issue of Destructo Boy, a fun sci-fi zany epic that is fit for the whole family and follows a little robot on a giant space station as he battles crime, villainy, and giant monsters and whatever threats should arise to his home. Each weekly serialized post includes commentary and annotations on the comic. I am also posting commentary tracks for the MCU, the Snyderverse, and any movies in general over at Pop Pop Popcorn, which I will be posting a audio commentary track of any movie and a follow-up discussion video. There's also behind-the-scenes progress posts of The Custodians as I am working on it, original art, and much more. 25 years later,
Lex Luthor chastises Brainiac for mistakenly shrinking and capturing Stalingrad instead of Moscow. Then Superman crashes into his office and demands to know where Brainiac is. Out in space, Brainiac's ship prepares to travel out of the solar system when Superman crashes through it and steals Brainiac's CPU. Then he returns to Luthor's office, and Luthor makes fun of him for taking a whole 58 seconds to travel the 45,000 miles to Brainiac's ship and back, and Superman says that Brainiac's systems didn't have any information on how to return the shrunken cities to their normal size, and Lex tells him that the all-intelligent Superman can surely think of a way to reverse it. Then Superman takes the bottled city and leaves as Lex calls his assistant, Mrs. Teschmacher, that he's ready for attack plan number 307. Also, apparently Kennedy is president at this time, having taken over after Richard Nixon was assassinated in 1963, and he's granted Georgia independence, according to this newspaper. And, fun fact, the United States and Chile are the only two countries in the world who, 1, chose to remain independent of the Soviet sphere, 2, are still capitalistic economies, and 3, are both on the verge of fiscal and societal collapse. In Moscow, Lana provides a tour of the Superman Museum. Such exhibits include the giant key from the Fortress of Solitude, the punching arm car from the Superpowers toy line, Hall of the CIA-funded Rogues Gallery, Kryptovarish, and a giant dinosaur. Anyway, part of the tour group is a guy dressed like the Goon from the Goon comic, and he's warned by a guard with a strange metal device in the side of his head that they are only allowed 90 seconds inside each exhibit. Later that evening, the man leaves the Superman Museum and wanders alone through Moscow until he arrives at a small tavern where a Soviet soldier is talking about the Batman. Then we're given into the fact that weird metal thing that was on the side of that guard's head earlier, it's because he got lobotomized. Superman has been lobotomizing dissidents and criminals and are now turning them into what are colloquially called Superman robots. Anyway, the guy with the big coat and the cap is Russian Batman. He tells the bartender that the fireworks display is almost ready and to remember his alibi. That night, Batman makes an announcement across the radio waves of Moscow.
My apologies for interrupting a perfect evening of totalitarian oppression. I've got a message for anyone who values their life. In precisely 4 minutes, Moscow's Superman Museum will erupt into a beautiful, flickering fireball. Batman out.
Later that night, the head of the KGB, Peter, enters Superman's domicile to find him sculpting a statue. He asks where the hell Superman was because Batman has once again escaped the KGB, and he demands to know why they can't just fucking kill him. Superman tells him that his utopia wasn't built on the bones of his opponents. Then he hears a train signal malfunction 800 miles away in Minsk, and so he races away to stop 2 trains from colliding. And as he does so, we get this ominous narration thought box of Superman. And he says that he is growing bored of human conversation. Surprisingly, that really doesn't lead really anywhere for some reason. Like, you know, the Superman story, he becomes a dictator in this story and in the third part. But like the whole, oh, I grow bored of human conversation, he's like fucking Dr. Manhattan or something. They don't really play that angle up any further than this scene right here. Later, Superman and Wonder Woman, a communist convert and champion of social justice, rescue a burning tanker ship as they discuss the current situation of America. Superman uses his freeze breath to keep the tanker from exploding, and then he asks Diana if Luthor and the Americans are right. Does he really interfere with humanity too much? He notes that people have stopped wearing seatbelts altogether, and, like, they don't even carry life jackets anymore. They had to fucking save all these people on this fucking ship because none of them had lifeboats or life jackets. They just... Once Superman took over most of the world, seatbelts, safety jackets, any safety equipment, it's out of style now, baby. And he kind of realizes that the fears he had 30 years ago, if you remember earlier, he was thinking that people sort of just get into trouble because they know he'll be there. He's starting to worry that those fears that he once had and thought were crazy are, in fact, reality now. In Metropolis, Perry White is gifted a golden bust of Caesar, his catchphrase is Great Caesar's Ghost, by one of the new employees, Oliver Queen, as his retirement gift. Then he and Lois, the new editor, head into her new office to speak. Lois says it feels wrong sitting in Perry's chair, at Perry's desk, and Perry tells her that the country is falling apart and he's worried that the Daily Planet won't be around much longer. He tells her that she should have someone there to support her if it does. Like a husband! Lois says that she has a husband, and Perry tells her that she should have someone who thinks more about her than he thinks about destroying Superman. And later at LexCorp Industries, Lois enters and passes James Olsen, aka the anti-Superman advisor for President Kennedy, on his way out. Also, we learn that Kennedy is, married to Marilyn Monroe in this universe, who seemingly has changed her name back to Norma Jean, or maybe Lex Luthor just kind of refuses to call her Marilyn Monroe. Anyway, Lois tells Lex happy anniversary because they've been married for 23 years now, and Lex says that it's wonderful, surprised that she's here. Then he asks her to leave her present for him on his desk, and he'll make sure that one of his assistants gets it opened up later. And he reveals that Jack Kennedy and Norma are joining them for dinner because Kennedy has information he wants to provide Luthor regarding an extraterrestrial spaceship that crashed in Roswell in 1947. And in Moscow, Ruslov is driven through the city by a guy who may or may not be this version of Alfred. Why do I say that? Well, look at him. And 2, he swerves through traffic at great speeds and drives the car off of a bridge, where he then pulls Peter out into a sewer pipe, and the man later wakes up in the Batcave. Batman demands to know why Ruslov was spreading word that he wants to speak to the Ushanka-wearing Batman. And if you're not hip to it yet, Ruslov was the guy that killed Batman's parents, who were the dissidents who were spreading anti-Superman literature 25 years prior, back in the first part. Anyway, Batman reveals that he's soundproofed and I can only assume lead-lined the underground bunker so they can both speak freely. Peter reveals that Lex and the CIA have a proposition for Batman. They want him to kill Superman. Peter reveals that the CIA and Luthor are acting on information that they got directly from the USSR and that they've figured out Superman's weakness. And this is going to be the only shot they ever have to replace the alien that is leading humanity. An unspecified amount of time later, Superman's birthday is held for President Superman. As the fireworks display continues, the big finale was supposed to be Superman's shield symbol appearing in the sky made out of fireworks, but instead it forms the symbol of a bat. And meanwhile, in Siberia, Batman holds Wonder Woman hostage, her lasso wrapped around her body and throat. She tells Superman that he has only 10 seconds to find her, or Batman's gonna kill her. Superman rockets out of Moscow as Batman initiates the LexCorp program to begin at full power in 30 seconds.
What have you done to her, you animal? Rest assured, only her pride has been hurt. Now she is as obedient to me as all those poor dissidents she used to dominate for you. We ordinary people may lack your great speed and X-ray vision, but never underestimate the power of the human mind. We carry the most dangerous weapon on Earth inside these thick little skulls. I'm afraid it takes more than an explosive in your... Oh, sun lamps. Wonderful. Let them run for a few thousand years and I might get a heat rash. Ah! How did you? You don't get it, do you? Strange visitor from another planet, last son of a dying world. Ah! Everything they needed to defeat you could be found in those 2 phrases, Superman. All we had to do was create the right conditions. The solar lamps to simulate your native red sun was Luthor's idea. Digging you a cell beneath the Siberian detention camp was my little touch of poetic justice. Millions died to build the system you uphold. What you're about to feel is nothing compared to what they went through, you power-mad lunatic!
Run, Superman! Get out of the light!
Ugh. You should have never come here. You should have died on your own world and kept your alien hands out of humanity. We're human beings, and maybe now you'll appreciate just what that means. Diana, can you hear me? I need you to find the generator providing the electricity. Diana, please, I need you to find it and destroy it. No, he's using you. All he cares about is his power!
Get the hell out of my way, little man.
No more tricks. Just a few hours of brain surgery, and a job in a Moscow bank for you. Surely you know by now I'd rather murder myself for the cause than end my days as one of your ridiculous Superman robots. Oh, and it was Peter that betrayed you.
Superman, are you okay? I found the generator, just like you asked me to.
Not now, Diana. I have more important tasks at hand. Peter.
Meanwhile, in New Mexico, Kennedy and Luther, along with Norma and Lois, arrive at a secret facility where the U.S. government has been housing a UFO with a strange green symbol on it. Then Luther is led to the containment chamber, where they hold the dead body of the pilot of the ship, and Kennedy explains how they collected a ring and a strange green lantern from the craft. And they still can't figure out what the hell these things are. Lex takes one look at it, puts the ring on, and says that it's obvious. It's a weapon. And Superman's grip grows tighter across the world. Even when he offered utopia, some still fought to live in a hell. Diana, now an aging, elderly woman who lost the magic of an Amazon born of magical clay, I guess, grows resentful of Superman, and Peter became a Superman robot. The year is 2000. The world contains 6 billion communists. America has undergone a civil war, and for some reason the continent is partially flooded, although I think it's more likely that the colorist fucked up and colored the clouds blue. Moscow is now a technological utopia. Crime no longer exists in the world outside of the non-Soviet countries. Superman returns to his Fortress of Solitude. In this universe, it's called the Winter Palace, and it's built in Ukraine, I believe, where he's greeted by Brainiac and the newly lobotomized Sons of Batman. Brainiac, who has also been rehabilitated, explains that the productivity is up 8%. Life expectancy has reached 112. Suicides are down since he added fluoxetine hydrochloride, aka an anti-anxiety drug, to the water supply. However, America is still a war zone, as seen in this photo recreating Action Comics, and the US government still refuses the aid packages the Soviet Union has offered. Brainiac suggests that the humane action is to just invade and make them fall in line. But Superman says that the global revolution has been bloodless since he took over the party as dictator. I mean president. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor has won the election for presidency, along with his vice president, James Olsen. In January 2001, Lex Luthor ceased trade with the rest of the world and created a strict internal market. In February, he doubled the standard of living for every citizen, and in March, he doubled it again. In April, a return of employment swept the country. He eradicated homelessness in the 34 states still in America. On January 1st, the 16 other states returned to America. Yeah, I don't know what the other ones are. The US has 8 territories. Maybe it was them? Sometime later, Lex and Olsen discuss the possibility of an invasion by Superman, and Lex says that it's the only realistic option if Superman is really serious about his whole perfect world idea. Olsen says that they are fucked if he decides to invade. Then Lex presses a button on Air Force One, and the plane is transported to the Phantom Zone. Lex also reveals that he cracked the code for the Green Lantern ring. And the head of the program is Hal Jordan, who in this universe has a really fucked up will. He was captured and tortured by communists in Malaysia for 4 years back in the 80s, and now Lex thinks that he can take on Superman with just his ring alone. Back at the Winter Palace, Superman discovers that he forgot to inspect the filtration system of the bottle city of Stalingrad, which he has still been unable to reverse, causing parasites to grow and invade and destroy the city. Superman promises to fix it and then leaves to find Brainiac. Brainiac tells Superman that the newly reunited states pose a serious threat to everything he's accomplished. Brainiac suggests that they must strike first and execute Lex. But Superman argues against the machine that he does not want to invade. He's accomplished everything he has by winning the argument, not destroying his opponents. Ignore those Superman robots. That's not important. And he says that if he wanted to just beat the world into submission, He could have just had a utopia 50 years ago. Brainiac runs the numbers, and Brainiac calculates the total of 6.5 million dead, and the conflict lasting no longer than 8 hours. But for every 30 minutes that Superman waits, those variables double. Then Lex Luthor shows up and offers Superman a chance to surrender. Lex begins to just sort of show himself around Superman's Winter Palace. There's the Titanic, Kryptovarish, and Darkseid? What is that Darkseid thing doing down there? I can only assume it's a statue, but what does that possibly imply has happened in this universe? Anyway, Luthor explains that while Wonder Woman and the Amazonians prepare alongside his Green Lantern Marine Corps, Luthor has come to win on his own terms. But then he's dragged away by mechanical tendrils. Brainiac emotionlessly states that Luthor must be turned into a Superman robot like all other dissidents. And Brainiac has calculated that Luthor would have talked Superman into suicide within 14 minutes. Elsewhere, the Green Lantern Marine Corps maintain their speed of Mach 6 as Superman orders Brainiac to prepare his ship to assault the West Coast while Superman handles the East. Superman then soars into the Green Lantern Marine Corps and just starts destroying everything they have. Eventually, they're able to capture him in a cube that they're able to shrink smaller and smaller, but when Guy Gardner's will starts to give out because he starts thinking of a fucking TV show he used to watch as a kid, Superman is able to explode out of the cube and steal Hal Jordan's ring. Then he soars into action against the Amazons and fucking just destroys them too. Come on, it doesn't matter anymore, Lois. Forget the plan. We've got to get out of here.
Lex Luthor doesn't make mistakes. And he isn't going to make one now. I hope.
I'm going to have to ask you to evacuate the area, Mrs. Luthor. I respect that you're taking a stand like this, but we're destroying everything within a 5-mile radius, and I don't want anyone hurt.
I'm sorry, Superman, but I'm not budging an inch.
America is finished. I'm afraid you don't have anything left to hit me with.
Actually, we've still got one shell left in our arsenal. Take a look inside my pocket.
I hardly think a brown manila envelope is going to stop me in my tracks. Even if it does have a presidential seal. Oh my God. What have I done? All I wanted was the best for everyone. That's all I wanted to do. You have to believe me.
Superman, you appear to be distressed.
Switch the weapon systems off, comrade. We're leaving.
You cannot stop now when you're on the brink of utopia. Denying them perfection is more morally corrupt than enforcing it.
Luthor was right, Brainiac. This isn't how the world was meant to be. We have no right to interfere.
I'm afraid that's unacceptable. Were you really foolish enough to think you could reprogram a level 12 intellect after I conquer this world? I will conquer planet by planet until the entire universe is under my command. We are one and the same, Superman.
Then the power shuts off, and Lex Luthor is revealed to be alive and within the heart of Brainiac's ship. Superman rockets into the ship and destroys Brainiac, and Lex asks if Superman plans on finally leaving the planet. Superman says that he plans on burying Brainiac and his ship on the moon, then they can talk about whether or not he stays on Earth. But then the ship begins a detonation countdown, and the 6 miniature black holes that were powering the ship begin to prime themselves to explode. Lex tells Superman that the power of that explosion will wipe out everything in a 15 million mile radius. And Lex says that not even Superman is that fast. Superman quickly takes Lex out to safety before he rockets himself and the ship into deep space. And as Superman soars through the cosmos, he says,
Lex, I know you're not going to hear this message for a while, or even see the explosion until the light reaches you. But there's something I have to say before I go. Well played, old friend. Superman gone. Brainiac gone. The world ready to embrace Lutheranism. One could almost be forgiven for thinking that this had all been worked out to the 10th decimal 40 years ago. Checkmate, Superman.
The world then celebrates like the ending of Return of the Jedi as Superman's Soviet Empire is toppled. In 2004, Lex and Olsen won in a landslide with 101% of the votes, a statistic that mathematicians are still confused by. I don't know if that's supposed to be some reference to Bush's first election, I guess. Anyway, within 6 months, the world had joined Luthor's global United States, and Luthor then set up his home base within Superman's Winter Palace, where he combined his own ideas with Superman's records to create a new form of government never seen before. Cancer and AIDS were cured. Diabetes, blindness, and every inherited form of illness was completely eradicated. Even sleep is no longer necessary. On his 75th birthday, Lex Luthor retired conventional politicians and created a one-world government of artists, writers, philosophers, and scientists. At the age of 120, he saw the entire solar system colonized, and the average person now lives to at least 800 years old. At the dawn of the 4th millennium, in his cryo chamber with his wife at his side, Lex Luthor is interviewed and asked what his greatest achievement was.
Defeating the alien. What in the world could possibly compare with saving my people from Superman?
Lex Luthor was laid to rest in a geometric maze of his own design in the city formerly known as Metropolis, now called Lexor. And at the outskirts of Lex Luthor's funeral stands an aged Superman in disguise, and he watches his old rival be interred before leaving on his way.
For the first time, I could sit back and see the wonders of the world through human eyes, and appreciate a resourcefulness which I'd failed to give them credit for. Mankind evolved to become the most advanced species in the known universe, inspired by 1 billion years of the Luthor lineage. Lena Luthor, the artist. Lombard Luthor, the Imagineer. Lori Luth 145, the Mathemagician. Jordan Luth, 1938, pioneering Necronaut and the first man to step foot in the afterlife. Lex L, Jordan L, Lana L, and of course, Lex's great-grandson to the power 50, a young man called Jor-El, whose IQ exceeded that of even his beloved ancestor.
Idiots, we are governed by idiots, Laura.
What happened, Jor-El? Didn't the Science Council listen to your warnings?
Listen. Those oversatisfied fools didn't even look at my readings. I gave them firm, substantiated evidence that the world is on the brink of collapsing into our sun, and they tell me the planet's merely shifting in its orbit. It's like they have nothing left to do but die. But I refuse to let them bring harm to you, my little Kal-El. Why should you suffer for being born into a world with nothing left to conquer?
Do we really have to send him, Jor-El? Their people are so primitive and weak.
He will be strong and fast, virtually indestructible. And he'll need those advantages to survive. Goodbye, my son. Go back and change the world so that we might not become this cold, complacent lot. Go back and bring light into our lives again. I hope you enjoyed this episode of What Is. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Any Superman comics that you would suggest that I cover? Superman for All Seasons probably might be the most popular one, I'd imagine. Mark Millar. He gets Superman. He just seems to get Superman based on what little he has already written of Superman. He gets it. He gets the character, and I am looking forward to his upcoming Superman Action Comics series. I can't remember which one he's doing specifically, but it should be releasing sometime soon, and I am hopeful for it. I know everybody's like, oh, well, Mark Millar, he writes, he's edgy to be edgy for the sake of it, and he's this and that, he's a shit starter. But there's a sort of reverence for Superman that writers like Millar and Ennis, those are the two biggest examples that I can think of, have. Superman is the superhero. He's the first. He's the greatest. He's the most hopeful that you can have. And I can understand why they take the ideas and ways that they roll with other superheroes the way that they do. Because Superman is the progenitor of it. And everyone after that's just, it's just a capitalistic, nationalistic, Captain America was, let's fight the war effort. Let's join the war. Spider-Man, kids want to read about superheroes who are like themselves, stuff like that. Superman is purely altruistic. He, in his very first comic, what does he do? He saves Lois Lane after she declines sleeping with a guy who's trying to grab her and grope her and shit in public. And that guy turns out to be like a mobster, so he fucking tries to kidnap her. The famous scene of Superman smashing the car over his head, that's him smashing their car after they try to kidnap Lois and do God knows what to her. Superman stops a man from being wrongly executed by finding the actual criminal. Superman stops a man from beating his wife. And the final section of Superman's first ever appearance in the story, it sets up a two-parter little subplot of Superman discovering corrupt lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and the issue ends with Superman going to D.C. to investigate it further, and then the next issue starts with Superman continuing his investigations and stopping the corruption. So why wouldn't anyone have that reverence for Superman? No matter what, he is always good. And that's, for some reason, become a problem for people. Superman is, he's boring. He's a Boy Scout. Who cares about Superman? I want to read The Punisher. I want to see Homelander. What does that say about where society has gone? Where not even society, where the subculture of comic fandom has gone? Where Superman has become dull and boring because people think that you can't do anything with him. People think he's too nice. Why wouldn't you want your hero? There's a whole saying called "don't meet your heroes," which explicitly implies that your heroes are going to be pieces of shit. But Superman isn't. But people want him to be. Why? I truly believe that this is one of, if not the best book Mark Millar has ever done. Although it's funny that the Superman 2000 proposal specifically said no evil Superman or crazy Superman stories, and he goes off and does this as his first, breakaway holy Superman original story. But Soviet Superman is an interesting take, and his costume is really cool. And the story does a fairly interesting job of taking that almost classic argument against Superman, which has really come around within the past 20 years or so, of why does Superman fight for the American way? But in this, it's why does he fights for truth, justice, and the Soviet way? With that, you can really analyze Superman and what Superman means. He doesn't fight for the Soviets. He fights for people. He fights for justice and freedom. And yeah, it kind of gets ruined when he starts fucking lobotomizing people and goes evil, which I think was a downfall of this story. But you need conflict, so I understand it. But it's an interesting analysis of that argument of, oh, well, why does Superman fight the American way, huh? Well, why doesn't he fight for the English way or the Indonesian way, huh? You know, it's a way to bring that up without people getting pissy about, actually this comic about Superman, it's actually criticizing America. But in this, you can be like, oh, well, no, he's just criticizing those crazy Russians. And this story also brings up the question of free will versus determinism, which is nuts. Does any of this matter? Are all of these events predestined to just always happen? If his existence truly is one giant loop, an Ouroboros eating its own tail, does it matter? Does he actually have any agency at all? Is he really to blame for what happened? There's no possible chance that Superman in this universe would ever land on Earth 12 hours earlier or 12 hours later, because then he would never be sent back in time to begin with. He'd never be born. If he lands 12 hours later, might go into the Pacific Ocean. If he lands 12 hours early, it's just going to be normal Superman. And that would seemingly either erase reality or create some other paradox. It's wholly unchangeable. Everything in this comic is fated to happen, and it's always inevitable. And in a way, it creates a perfect comic book, because every time you reopen this story to reread it, it's like you're not just opening a book again. Instead, you're revisiting this universe's dimensional structure as a time loop. You can fucking finish this book and then go all the way back to the beginning page, and it makes sense. It's a perfect structure for this to happen. Even more so than if it was a movie. It works better because you can physically go back through time in these pages. And again, is Superman morally responsible for his actions? Or is he playing out a role in an unalterable timeline that no one can possibly change? How do we determine that? It kind of reminds me of a view of the afterlife that I learned about a couple of years ago via Alan Moore. It's a secular view of the afterlife that I discovered while watching and listening to Alan Moore discussions. Here's the clip.
So I thought, how do I feel about death? And I started to think, well, you know, I think I've got a fairly decent attitude towards it, but how does it work? And I started to think about what I knew about physics, which is that every scientist since Einstein has apparently agreed that we inhabit a space-time that has at least 4 dimensions. The 3 dimensions that we normally perceive, and a 4th, which is a spatial dimension like the others, but which we perceive as the passage of time. This is like a big solid universe, and that only our minds are moving. Nothing in the universe is moving. It's solid. It's a blocked universe. Our minds are traveling through that, and it's a bit like, say, a projector beam playing over a strip of film. None of the individual images in that strip of film are changing or moving. But if the projector beam plays over them, then Charlie Chaplin does his funny walk. He beats the baddie, he gets the girl. There's a story, there's narrative. None of the frames have actually moved or changed. That is the way that I believe we have our lives. And also, that would mean that when we get to the end of our lives, there's not really anywhere for our consciousness to go but back to the beginning, which is, depending on how you feel about your life, a really brilliant or a really horrifying idea. I kind of liked it because it doesn't require, it's a completely secular afterlife. It doesn't require a God. You can have one if you want, but it doesn't require one. And also, it means that you're not being judged by any remote authority that you might not happen to agree with. If anything, you're perhaps being judged by yourself. It seems fairer, and it seems more credible.
That just really opened my eyes and intensified my desire to live life, and just have the most enjoyable life possible. As someone who is into magic and has worshipped non-traditional gods for the past several years, I just ate that shit up. Why wouldn't you want to experience life and have your most fantastic go at it if you're going to be having to experience it all over again? Is this the first time? Just like Superman Red Sun, is the first time that you read the book the first time that this time loop has happened? Or is it just, oh, you caught up right at the right time in media res? Are we already going through our lives again? Is Superman already going through his life again? Who knows? But that philosophical outlook on an afterlife, a completely secular view of it, just means to make your accomplishments. Do what you want as long as you're not harming others, the satanic way of life. Don't let your life mean nothing, is essentially what it comes down to. Your life should always have meaning, no matter what. It may not mean something to hundreds or thousands or millions of other people. It might mean something to 5 people. It might mean something to yourself. And if you make your life mean something, even if it's just something that is meaningful to yourself, then I'd say that that's a mighty fine goal to strive towards. Bet you didn't think I'd end a video about Mark Millar's Superman Red Sun with some Alan Moore fucking quotes and philosophy, did you? As always, check out my Patreon for updates on my comics, The Custodians and Destructo Boy. I am posting audio commentaries of movies and movie discussions. I'm posting original art on there. Check it out. You can get like a free trial or something. I'm not really sure how it works, but it's an option. Or you can subscribe to it for as little as $2 a month. You get access to pretty much nearly everything. Also, my Etsy shop, blaketwild.etsy.com. I will be reprinting The Custodians issue 1 sometime in either January or February. Early in the year, rather. I'll be reprinting the first issue. Over 60 pages, only $15. Far better deal than anything you'll get from Marvel or DC these days. And, yeah, again, let me know what you thought of everything in this video. This very long video. It's taken me an hour and a half to record, and it was a 25-page script. Bye!